All right, we are at the Mishnah on Daf 141, and we plan to finish the Perek today, the 20th Perek. So nearing the end of the Masechet soon. The Mishnah teaches, this is about Mukseh. We're going to see a whole bunch of different laws about doing things in an indirect way regarding Mukseh and laundering and things like that. Okay, Hakash al gabe mita lo yana'ne'anu beyado ela mina'ne'o begufo. So you have a straw on a bed, and you're going to go lie down on the bed. You can't move it. Straw is usually used as fire material, and so therefore it's mukseh on Shabbat. And so that's why, therefore, you can't move it. However, you can move it indirectly. So that means you lie down on the straw and you push it around with your body until it gets to your comfort level. That's okay. However, if it was, you designated it as food for an animal, or you put on the bed a sheet or a pillow that before Shabbat, then you show that I plan to use this for food or for bedding on Shabbat. And then in that case, it's not mukseh, and you can move it with your hands at will. Machbesh shel ba'alei batim matirin, avalo kobshin, a press for laundry. If it's a home press, not a professional one, and there's some pants in it, you can undo it, but not a professional press of a launderer. That's a special item that you can't use on, you can't use on mukseh, no matter what. Sorry, avalok kovshin, right? But you can't use it. You can't actually press with it. If something is in the press, you can take it out. If it's a launderer, shel kovsin, lo yigabo, then you can't touch it, not even to take out the pants that are in it. Rabbi Yehuda omer, im haya mutar me'erev Shabbat, atir et kulo v'shometo. Rabbi Yehuda says, if it was already loose before Shabbat, the clothing was in it, but it wasn't screwed on tight. And then you can, if it was loose already, you can loosen it more and simply take it out. It seems that there might be two different issues. It's not clear. Is Rabbi Yehuda arguing on Tanakama, or just giving a further explanation? And Tanakama would agree. I mean, if it's about that you don't want to do any pressing, any laundering on Shabbat, so well then if it's loose already, it's not getting pressed. So then what would be the problem? So perhaps for Tanakama, the problem is that it might be mukseh altogether. So even touching it is a problem. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I don't think it's mukseh, it's a problem of pressing. And then therefore, if you loosen it, if it's already loose, it's not being pressed, and then it's okay. Okay, so those are the couple of issues in the Mishnah. Someone's going to bring a whole bunch of different issues. Amar Rav Nachman, hay pulg la milmatla lemata shareh, milmata lema'la asir. We saw this tradition cited already, but this is probably the main place where it is. If you have a radish that you stuck in the ground, it's not growing, you buried it in the ground for safekeeping there. If you put it top to bottom, in other words, the wide part is on top and thin part on the bottom, and then you pull it out, that's fine, because none of the earth is going to be displaced. However, if you put it in upside down with the fat head on the underneath, and you pull it out from the thin part, then when you pull it out, the dirt is going to move, and its dirt is mukseh, and so you're causing that you're moving the dirt, and that's mukseh. Okay, now in this case, you're actually only moving it indirectly. You're not touching the dirt, right? You're only touching the vegetable. So we're going to see that we're going to reject this. Amar Ada bar Abba, Amre berav Tanena de la kerav Nachman. Our Mishnah we just read rejects this statement of Rav Nachman. Hakash shal gabe hamita lo yena'neo beyado aval mena'neo begufo. ואם היה מאכל בהמה, או שהיה עליו כד או סדין, מנענעו בידו. Okay, that's the Mishnah we just quoted that says that even if the straw is mukseh, you're allowed to move it around you're allowed to lie down on it and then just move it around with your shoulders. So in that case, you're moving it indirectly, not directly with your hands, but just as you're moving, it's conforming. That is the same as pulling out the radish upside down, and the dirt getting moved on its own. So therefore, it's indirect. Shema mina tiltul min hasad la shemet tiltul shema mina, and we can conclude from the Mishnah that indirect moving of something mukseh is not called moving and is permitted, and therefore, same with the radish will actually be permitted. Okay, so that's an important halacha. Yeah, I mean, the dirt is something that's mukseh mechamat gufa. It's not like a hammer, which is mukseh mechamat isur. So it makes a big difference. If you have like a hammer is on a chair and you want to sit on the chair, you can just pick up the hammer and go and put it wherever you want. But let's say you have an outdoor chair and some leaves fell on it. So the leaves are mukseh mechamat gufa, similar to the dirt. So you can't pick up the leaves with your hand, but rather you could do it indirectly. You push the chair over and everything slides off. Then that would be a better way. Okay. Amar Rav Yehuda, hane pilpele medat hada hada bekata de sakina share tarte asir. If you want to crush peppers on Shabbat, so you could do it with that, not with the regular part of the knife, with the sharp part, but with the handle of the knife. So that way you're doing it with a shinui. And also you could just do one at a time, and that way is allowed. One is allowed, two is not allowed. The point is you're not preparing a lot of pepper to use later, but you have a dish right there and one little pepper, just like in the course of while you're eating, you smash something. So it's not grinding, but rather just the way of eating. Rava said, no, once you're using the back of a knife, so you're already making a shinui, so then you can even crush more at one time. Good. Amar Rav Yehuda. So Rav Yehuda is going to give a couple of statements. Once we mentioned doing something indirectly, or in a different way, shinui. So now we mentioned a few other halachot that are like that. Amar Rav Yehuda, amad desacheh b'mayal dingiv nafsheh beresha, v'adar lislig dilmate la'atoye arba amot bechar merit. Someone who bathes in water on Shabbat, they went into the river, something. They should dry first before walking out onto the dry land, because otherwise they will be carrying the water that's on them, right? They have the water on them, and then there's no eruv, and they're carrying the water. And that's a karmelit that in between, but still you shouldn't carry. So therefore, dry yourself off. Okay, we ask about that. Well, then how about going into the water? When you go into the water, you're displacing the water, you're pushing the water as you walk in, you're pushing the water and it's traveling inside the river or lake for amot, and so you're carrying, right? No, there is indirect. The water is not in your hands, it's not even on your body. It's just that you're pushing water, which is pushing other water. So that's indirect carrying. Indirect carrying in the karmelit, which is the Rabbanan to begin with, is no problem, and that would be okay. Right? The question comes up here: what about if you're walking in the rain, right? And oh, it's pouring now. If you're walking in the rain, so then you're gonna get very wet, and then you keep walking. You're carrying the water. Right, so isn't that a problem? Well, technically it could be a problem, but in that case, the person's anus. What can you do? You didn't go and get the water. You didn't go in the water. It's just raining on top of you, and so nobody says that is a problem. Otherwise, you have to just stand there till you dry off. Right. Okay. Amar Abaye v'itema Rav Yehuda tit shal gabe raglo mekancho bekarkav en mekancho ba. Someone gets some dirt on his shoes. This first statement, Abaya says, you should wipe it on the ground, but not on the wall. Why? Why can't you wipe it on the wall? Well, is it because it's like building? You're taking this, this dirt, this mud, and you're wiping it on the wall, it's like cementing the wall, right? You're making the wall stronger by putting this mud. It'll dry on the wall and stay there. Is that why? Ravas tells Abaye, says, but that's not real building. That's like a building of a peasant would do, a field laborer would do. That's not real building. It's not actually going to make it stronger. So we shouldn't consider that building. Ela amarav, Ravas, so Ravas says the opposite then. It's okay to wipe the mud off on the wall. What you shouldn't do is wipe it off on the floor. Because if you wipe it off on the floor, then you're going to level the holes on the floor, which if it's indoors would be building, and if it's outdoors would be considered plowing. And usually, if you want to try to get the dirt off, you're going to find, a ridge in on the floor that's that's like a beginning of a hole, and then by wiping it, you're going to make the hole straight. Okay, we have two other opinions that say wiping it on both is not allowed, or wiping it both ways on the floor on the wall are allowed. So we have all four permutations here. According to the one who said you're not allowed to wipe it not on the floor and not on the wall, so then how can you wipe your shoe? You can find a beam somewhere on the ground, and the beam will not be a problem of building, it won't be a problem of leveling, and that's the way you can do it. If you're sitting, you shouldn't sit right at the entryway of an alleyway. So if you remember, people's houses opened up to a shared courtyard, and the shared courtyards opened up to an alleyway, and the alleyway opened up to the main street, the Reshut HaRabim. In order to carry in the alleyway, you'd put a side post there. And if you sit right at the side post, then someone might be throwing a ball or something and might roll into the alleyway, and then you get right outside the alleyway into the Reshut HaRabim, and you're going to come and carry it back in because it's not necessarily evident. It's not like sitting at your doorstep where it's very clear inside and outside because you have a roof there. But the alleyway is not so clear, so therefore don't sit right at that spot. If you have a barrel and you want to move the barrel around so that it's nice and steady and level on the floor, you shouldn't do that because as you're spinning the barrel, moving it around, you're going to end up leveling the ground underneath it. So leveling the ground has a lot of applications. You shouldn't put a rag into the mouth of a jug. You want to kind of close it up with a rag or with stuffing. You shouldn't do that because it's going to get wet, right? Because the jug is liquid coming out of it, and as you're squeezing it in, you're really wringing out the cloth. Someone gets some dirt on his shirt, so you can take the insides of the shirt and rub it indirectly, but not rub the dirt directly and scrape it off the shirt, because that would be laundering. Laundering on Shabbat, a lot of people make a mistake. They're eating, whatever, some dirt gets on the shirt, and then they put water on it, and they start rubbing it out, and that is really laundering. So you can't do any of that. Really can't put water on it, and even rubbing it off would only be in an indirect way. Yeah. Someone gets some cement on the shoe. You can scrape it off with the back of a knife. In other words, doing it in an indirect way. And if it's on his clothing, and then scrape it off with his nail. Okay, but not rub it out, because that rubbing it out would be laundering. My love shaloi chases kelal. So doesn't that mean that? Don't rub it out. Don't rub it. So doesn't that mean that you can't rub it at all? Not even with the back of the shirt. No, that also means don't rub it directly, putting your fingers on it and rubbing it, but rather from the back of the shirt, then that's an indirect way and it's okay. אמר רבי אבהו, אמר רבי אלעזר, אמר רבי ינאי מגרים מן על חדש אבל לא ישן. So some mud gets on a shoe, so you can rub it off from a new shoe. A new shoe, the leather is very strong, and so even if you're rubbing it off, the leather is not going to stay well. But if an old shoe and you start rubbing off the mud, you're going to end up rubbing off a layer of the leather as well, and then you're preparing tanning leather. So what should you do? So rather use the back of the knife. Like we saw before, the back of the knife, I guess, is very useful. Use it for crushing peppers. And since it's not so sharp, if you use that for rubbing off the mud of on the shoe, then it won't rub off the leather itself. So an elder was there and told Rabbi Abahu, delete what you just said. He said you use the back of a knife. He said that is incorrect. Don't teach that anymore, because we have a baraita from Rabbi Chia says en megarin lo min al hadash velo min al yashan, that you should not scrape off not a new one and not an old one, either way. So this whole statement of Rabbi Abahu up here that said you can use scrape off a new one but not an old one, delete it. Okay, so what do we have? We have Rabbi Abahu's statement and then the statement that says delete it. Okay, so we didn't really delete it. We just recorded the tradition that says you should delete it. It's actually hard to delete things in those days because everything's memorized. So one thing something is memorized, someone remembers it, right? So the only way to delete it is really to record an additional tradition that says don't teach that tradition.
Just like Lashon Hara.
Right, exactly. You can't undo it. You could just you have to add something else that's more, change it to positive. And ולא יסוך את רגלו שמן והוא בתוך מנעל או בתוך הסנדל. And additionally, he says what you cannot do is put oil on your legs, on your feet, while it's in the shoe or the sandal. Right? The person wants to put oil on the sandal, going to polish it, make it look nice. And so you do it, he's trying to do it indirectly by putting it on his foot, which is allowed. You can put oil on your foot, and then it'll get on the shoe because it's already in the shoe. Now you can't do that because it's definitely going to get on the shoe. What you can do is put oil on your foot, and then put the shoe on, and that way it's more indirect, the oil getting from the foot onto the shoe. Another thing you can do if you want, you have this leather carpet or kind of tablecloth and you want to put oil on it, you can't put oil on it directly, but you put oil on your whole body and then you roll around on it. That seems kind of strange, but maybe it's fun. Okay, and in that case of that carpet, you can do it only to polish it, but not to tan it, right? If that's your intention to tan it. Of course you can't tan it. I mean, no one would even think that. But too, even to polish it, does anyone think that you're allowed to go and polish it? Rather, Rav Chisda must have meant as follows. We're talking about the amount of oil that you're going to put on. It should be only the amount that you would use to simply polish it, and not the amount that you would use to tan it. But actually polishing it or tanning it would obviously be prohibited. A small person shouldn't go out with a big shoe because it's not going to fit well, and then it's going to fall off, and the Reshut Harabim is going to carry it. But he can go out with a large cloak, because even if it's too big, it's not going to fall off. He'll hold it on, and that's okay. A woman can't go out with a shoe that is torn on top, because then she'll be embarrassed and she'll take it off and carry it. She also cannot do chalitza on it, because it's not a shoe that she was going to wear she's going to keep taking it off. So it's not even considered a shoe for her. If she did chalitza with it, then bidi avad, the chalitza is valid. And she should also not go on Shabbat wearing a new shoe because it doesn't fit. So a new shoe, it might not fit so well, and she's going to start walking, and then she's going to know what, this is really uncomfortable. She's going to take it off. I guess women were more particular about the shoe size than men. Maybe they were more fitted. Okay, so that's only talking about a woman's shoe. That's only if she didn't wear it at all. But even if she just wore it a little bit on the previous day, she can wear it on Shabbat. And even if she wore it Friday night and that's it, then it's still okay. She can wear it on Shabbat. Not Friday night. I mean, like before Shabbat. She wore it a little bit before Shabbat. If it's okay for a few minutes, and it's okay. Taneh hada. So we have two opposite, but I thought now we're still regarding shoes. Shomtin me'al gabe imus. V'tanya idach en shomtin. Okay, you give your shoe to a shoemaker. He puts it on a form. Right? They still use it today, right? And then it gets tight on the form. And so he left it there on that form into Shabbat. So one baraita says you can loosen that form and take off the shoe, and one baraita says you can't. So we have two opposite baraitot that seem to contradict. Actually, each one follows a different Tana, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbanan. Let's see, how do we know that? Well, we have another Mishnah regarding Tum'ah, but we saw a lot of connections between the laws of Tum'ah and the laws of Shabbat. In general, not on Shabbat. If you have a shoe that's on the shoe form, the Rabbi Eliezer says tahor. In other words, it's tahor because it's not a utensil. Anything that's not a utensil, if it's just a piece of leather, then even if something tameh touches it, it cannot contract tum'ah. And so too, this shoe, he's working on it. The shoemaker's fixing it. He's not done yet because it's still on the shoe form. And so therefore, until he takes it off, it's not a utensil. And therefore, something tameh touches it, it's tahor. Since it's not a utensil, anything not a utensil is also mukseh. Can't use it. It's not a utensil. It's not a shoe. And therefore, Rabbi Eliezer is the one that says, en shomtin, you can't take it off because mukseh, you can't move it. However, Chachamim say, even though it's still on the shoe form, but he finished it. It's usable. So it doesn't matter. Even if it's on the form, it's still called a utensil. And so therefore, it can become tameh, and therefore also it is a utensil. It's a kli, and therefore it's not mukseh. And so you can just loosen and take the shoe off of the form. Good. Well, this makes sense according to Rabbah. He says that something is melachto le'isur, meaning a tool that you usually use for prohibited, like a hammer, or in this case, like the shoe form. Whether it's for itself, I want to use the hammer to open nuts, or because I need the space, I want to sit on the chair, I'm allowed to move it. In this case, the shoe form, I need to move it in order to get the shoe out. So that would be allowed because I want to get to the shoe, so I can move it to get the shoe. In that case, for Chachamim, this would be allowed. How Abaye is more machmir. He said I can use the shoe form if I needed to go and open a nut with it. But for its space, I can't. And in this case, I want to move the shoe form to get to the shoe. So I will move it out of the way. And that would not be allowed. So my ikalimemar, right? In other words, even according to Chachamim, who say the shoe itself is not mukseh, but the form is mukseh, mechamat isur, and cannot be moved for its space. So how would I be allowed to move it and to remove the shoe? Oh, we're dealing with a case where it's loose on the form, and so therefore I can just take the shoe off without having to directly move the form. I guess there's clamps on it and things to hold it. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Im haya rafui mutar. If Rabbi Yehuda says if the form was loose, then I can take the shoe off. Good. Tamad rafui, halo rafui la. Only if it because it's loose. If it was not loose, then that would be a problem because then I have to be touching, moving the form, and that would be mukseh. All right, good. So we solved that. But now we have an opposite problem. Hani chalabaye. If we do follow the Yehuda, and we do assume that it's loose on the form, that's okay for Abaye. Since he says that I cannot move it I can move it for itself if I need to use it, but I can't move it to get something else, in this case the shoe. I can't do that. That's why it's only okay if it's loose, but not if it's tight. So according to Ravad, it says I can move it even just to get the shoe off. Then even if it's tight, I should be allowed. So now why tell me only if it's loose, right? Well, you can't have it both ways. We just, answered the question for Abaye, so and then we create a problem for Ravav. So which way is it going to be? He was saying that, yes, according to Rabbi Yehuda, but in the name of Rabbi Eliezer. The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, Im haya rafui mutar. Right? Even Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Eliezer that if it was loose, it's allowed. And so when he said his statement, he was saying it in the name of Rabbi Eliezer that would permit. And so we were able to resolve all of the different permutations. And that brings us to the end of the perek. Hadran alach, tolin, chazakim uberuchim.